One thing I love about summer is how easy everything feels. The days are a little more relaxed, and I find myself reaching for the same comfortable, go anywhere pieces again and again. That's why I keep coming back to Quince. They focus on well-made essentials that naturally become those everyday staples you actually live in all season long. This ad may sound a little different because I'm recording it from Zaragoza, Spain, and I brought with me my new Quince Clubhouse golf shorts. And these are definitely going to be one of those comfortable pieces that I wear all summer. Everything at Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work directly with ethical factories and cut out the middleman, so you're paying for exceptional quality, not brand markup. And it's not just clothing. Quince has become a trusted favorite for everything from home to travel to everyday essentials. Make your summer wardrobe easier. Go to quince.com/traveler for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/traveler for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler, and thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
Amateur Traveler, episode 1003. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about reefs and snorkeling, resorts and beaches, waterfalls and kava as we go to the island nation of Fiji. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Fiji. I would like to welcome back to the show Jonty Crane from JontyTravels.com. One of my favorite guests, and Jonty has come to talk to us about Fiji. Jonty, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
And what is your connection with Fiji?
I spent 6 months living there, so I know the place quite well.
And why were you in Fiji?
I was volunteering. So for people who remember my episode on Timor-Leste, I spent a year volunteering in Timor-Leste with my wife to Volunteer Service Abroad, which is a New Zealand NGO in the tourism space. And then we enjoyed it so much, we thought we'd go into it again. So we did it in Fiji, this time for 6 months. So I was working with SPTO, which is the Pacific Travel Organization. So it's not quite an NGO, but it works across all the Pacific Islands to help them with tourism initiatives. So that was quite an interesting experience. And I lived in Suva. But today I'm going to talk a bit about Fiji in total and really focus as a traveler as opposed to living there.
Right. Sure. Excellent. And why should someone go to Fiji?
It is the classic Pacific tropical island, and that is both because of the incredible snorkeling and diving. It's got attractive beaches, very welcoming people, but it's also probably the most established place for tourism in the South Pacific. So 60% of all tourists in the South Pacific go to Fiji, and tourism is about 40% of the economy of Fiji. So it's very heavily reliant on tourism, and it is by far the biggest tourist destination in the South Pacific, and which makes it I guess chicken and egg because it's the easiest one to get to. It's got the most flights to connect to it. So if you're trying to get to Tonga or Samoa or Tahiti or other places like that, they're a bit more difficult. So Fiji is the kind of epicenter of the South Pacific.
I did not realize it was that large a percentage. Interesting. Cool. And what itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
So I'm going to talk about 4 different kind of trips you can do, which could be between 2 and 5 days each. So you can combine those into a longer trip, which is what a lot of people do when they visit. And it is a very popular destination for New Zealanders and Australians. And there's not that many Europeans who go all the way to Fiji, but if they're going to go to Australia or New Zealand, they might stop over in Fiji on the way home. So this will give you some ideas about what you can do while you're there. Because Fiji it's got about 330 islands, so a fair number, about a third of which are inhabited. And in terms of where it is on the map, so if you fly basically directly north from Auckland in New Zealand, it's about 3 hours directly north. If you think about Australia, where Cairns is, so fairly high up in Queensland, fairly high Australia, northern, rather than high. If you fly 4 hours east of there, then you get to Fiji. And if you're going from the west coast in the States, it's about an 11 or 12 hour flight. And then in terms of a bit of background about the place, so the islands were first settled about 3,000 years ago. And then really in the 19th century, the Europeans arrived, and then the British officially colonized it in 1874. What's quite unique about Fiji is the British brought indentured laborers from India to work on the sugar plantations. So now Indo-Fijians make up about a third of the population. And then you've got kind of native Aituki, the rest of the population. Now, it gained independence in 1970 from the Brits, and then it had a bit of a rough ride in the 90s and early 2000s. There were a few military coups and a bit of political instability, but for the last 20 years, it's been a relatively stable democracy.
Yeah, democracy is not quite as easy as we sometimes think.
As you're demonstrating at the moment, I believe.
We won't get into that. Excellent. Where are we going to start?
Let's start with the Yasawas, which are fabulous place. So the Yasawa Islands. So there's a few main islands. There's Viti, Levu, which is the main island. Then you've got another big island, but a lot of places where tourists are going to go are kind of the offshore islands. And this is a string of islands, about 20 volcanic islands just northwest of Nadi. So Nadi is on the western side of Fiji. It's where the international airport is. It is the tourism hub of Fiji.
And that's the largest island or one of the two largest islands? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so that's the largest island by a reasonable margin. It's probably in the top 10 largest islands in the Pacific. I mean, they're not very large, but it's a reasonable size island. So these are a kind of collection of small volcanic islands just off the coast. So it's somewhere between 2 and 5 hours to get there by boat. And interestingly, until 1987, there was no tourism in the Yasawas. The local king of the area didn't want any tourism, but that's now changed and it is quite a popular place to visit. So there's a string of resorts around. And I know this podcast doesn't really tend to focus on resort culture because there's not a huge amount to say about resorts. At the end of the day, you tend to have similar kind of things. I mean,
I'm not opposed to staying at resorts. It's just that it is hard to describe one versus another. So, yeah.
Correct. An hour podcast on a resort. Yeah, it's a different kind of thing. But I'll talk a little bit about the Blue Lagoon Beach Resort. So that's where I stayed. And that's quite a good example of a Fijian resort. And they actually, I think there's 3 of them owned by the same people. And they're very similar. On the way to this resort, we stopped one of the others. And it was a bit different, but same but different. So you've got garden villas, you've got beach villas. They had some nice yurts. There was a couple of pools, a couple of restaurants. Actually, one of them was a Japanese restaurant. They did a 10-course degustation kind of meal, and they would change the menu every 2 days. And then the main restaurant, they changed the meal every 2 days. So basically, if you just ate in a different restaurant each night, you'd get different food each day. So that was pretty flash, and it had a lovely reef just off the beach, good for snorkeling, lots of fish around. And then you can also get a boat out to go and snorkeling. And that was about 55 Fijian dollars, which is about 25 US dollars, to go and do a couple of snorkels with a guide. And then, their sister ones are the Octopus Resort and the Paradise Cove. Now, Blue Lagoon Beach Resort. Does Blue Lagoon mean anything to you?
Well, there was a movie, but that's where I go.
That's where the movie was filmed, in this part of Fiji, in the Islands.
Okay.
And it's weird because I think it's Brooke Shields, and it's one of those, it's an 80s movie that when you look at the trailer now, it looks completely inappropriate, and you just wonder how on earth they made this film.
She was like 14 or something like that.
It was very, you're like, okay, interesting. But if you've seen the film, then that's where they shot the film around here. So one of the famous places people go there from the resort is the Ovalau caves, which are pretty cool caves. So you come down some quite well-designed steps, and then you've got a bit of an area you can swim around, and then you go one of these classic swim-throughs. So I recommend, if you're not overly confident, you want to be going at low tide, because then you're just dipping your head underneath the rocks. If you're going at high tide, you've got a reasonable way to swim under, and then you go up into a kind of cavernous area, which is pretty cool. It's funny, the group we went with, I think 90% of us went under, but 10% were like, no way, we're not doing that. In the cave, it's very deep. You don't really appreciate it until you look down, and it's probably 20, 30, 40 meters deep below you, and then you've got the cave above. So that's quite a cool little experience you can do from there. Also, behind the resort, so these are all kind of volcanic islands, and this is on the island of Nakula. There's really good hiking. It's not multi-day hiking, but it's great for getting out for a couple of hours. There was long green grass, nice views. It was one of the better places I went hiking in Fiji. So that's what you could do around the Yasawas. You stay at the resort, you go and do some diving or snorkeling, you eat some nice food. And so Fiji is very much a resort destination. Like, there isn't, if people have listened to my previous episode on Samoa, in Samoa you have these fallets, which are basically just a little hut on the beach, and they cost like $10 a night. That doesn't really exist in Fiji. Everything is generally mid-market and above. There is a few Airbnbs, but they're not that common. Some of the resorts have hostel-style dorm rooms, so if you're on a budget, that is an option. Pretty much all the resorts are by the water. There's quite a lot near Nandi, where the airport is, along the Coral Coast, which is the south coast of Viti Levu, which is the main islands. You've got the Yasawa Islands, you've got the Mamauka Islands, which are just below the Yasawa Islands. You've got Taveuni, which I'll speak to a bit later, and on the south coast of Levu, which is the second largest island, which is just the north of Viti Levu, the largest island. So, yeah, there's plenty of resorts in Fiji. What's quite good to understand is about 2/3 of them are actually owned locally, and a lot of those are owned by the Fijian Pension Fund. So the money you're spending is going to the locals.
Interesting.
It does feel a bit like they're putting all their eggs in one basket because it's, if, for example, the price of oil went up by a huge amount and flights are very expensive and you're a small island of the Pacific, not so many people may visit. There are obviously like Australian internationally owned resorts, but yeah, a number are locally owned. And they all pretty much offer the same sort of thing from what I've seen. Like they'll have village tours, so you can go out to the local village and see life there. You can go to the church on Sunday and see the locals at church. Get massages, snorkeling, diving. So that's kind of a pretty standard resort setup.
Okay.
So that's the Yasawas. So that's northwest of the main island. Now, if we go to southeast of the main island, there's an island of Taveuni. And Taveuni is the third largest island, but it's quite a lot smaller than the first two. And it's known as the Garden Island because it's very green and lush. But the reason it's very green and lush is it rains quite a lot. So this is a trade-off. If you're there when it's sunny, it's fantastic. But I went there when it was raining and it was still fantastic. But you just realise that the reason it's so lush is because it rains a lot. So between Taveuni and Vanuatu, the second largest island, is the Rainbow Reef. And this is known as the soft coral capital of the world. So people will visit Fiji to go and visit Rainbow Reef because it is a fantastic place for snorkeling and diving. You're looking at probably $35 US for a half-day snorkeling trip with a couple of snorkels, a couple of sites, or about $100 US for diving. And this is in quite open water, so you do need to be reasonably comfortable swimmer. Like you're between these two islands and you're a fair way offshore. But yeah, fantastic snorkeling and diving there. Lots of interesting coral formations. I actually personally enjoyed, there's one much closer to shore called Honeymoon Island. And you can either get a local guy in his boat who'll take you out there and it's cheaper, or you can even rent a kayak or borrow a kayak from your resort and kayak out there. It's relatively close. I enjoyed it because it was a lot shallower. So Rainbow Reef, if you're snorkeling, you're a reasonable way off the coral because you're out in the middle of the ocean basically. So I think it's probably a better experience to dive Rainbow Reef, but for snorkeling, the Honeymoon Island closer to shore is a fantastic spot. There is a few hiking options on Taveuni. Now, hiking in Fiji, as people have heard me before, I quite like hiking, is very similar to other Melanesian countries. It is very controlled. You're not just going to wander off by yourself. You need permission. You need to probably do it along a designated walkway. It's not like Timor-Leste where you can just do what you want. You do need to follow the marked routes that they have, which are generally done by local communities. So there's one called the Laverna Coastal Walk, and people regard it as one of the best hikes in Fiji. It's about 10 kilometers out and back, so it's about a half day. And there's a nice waterfall, and there's a little bit, we have to kind of cross a bit of a river crossing, and there's a chain you can hold on as you go across. So it's quite nice if you want to do a bit of something that's not water related. There's also quite a fun activity as a natural rock water slide. And so it's a bit like a hydro slide, but it's made of rock, which I was a little bit apprehensive about. I thought, well, rock's not that forgiving, but obviously it has been well used over the years. And the passage of many people's bottoms has smoothed out the rock into quite a, it was just right. There was enough going on that it felt a little bit exciting and edgy, but it wasn't enough that I felt like I was going to break a bone. So there's this kind of happy medium that it was fun, but not too wild.
And is that the Waitavala natural rock water slide?
It's on the west side of the island towards the north. I think there might be a couple around. I think I just called it the Rocks water slide. If you look in Google Maps, it's quite close to a prison, which I wasn't expecting to see on the way. I was like, oh, there's the prison. And they're like, yeah, the prison's just 5 minutes away from the water slide. Okay, interesting. So that's a good activity. A lot of these things you want to go with a local or get some local guidance because you need to know where to get in and where to get out for the safe part of the rocks. It's very close, actually, if you're looking on Google at the moment, Chris, it's close to the international date line. So that runs through Taveuni. Okay. Now, the whole of Fiji is on one time zone, but the actual line and meridian runs through near to there. So they've got a bit of a sign. You get the classic photo op of one standing on one side of the date line versus the other side date line. So it's the only date line, which is between the US, which is a day behind, and then New Zealand, Australia a day ahead. So Fiji sits on the New Zealand, Australia side of that line. So if you're traveling to Fiji from the States, just be very careful about what day you're taking off and arriving, because you may be arriving.
I have made that mistake. If that makes sense. Yep. If you're meeting a tour, was my experience.
So were you a day early or a day late?
Well, I planned to have an extra day. Unfortunately, I got there on time then. But
okay. So yeah, it's easy to get a day out. Now, I didn't do this, but I would probably, learning would be to probably rent a car for 1 or 2 of the days on the island. Like, the roads are they're fine. There's not a lot of traffic around. It's just getting to the different things you want to do can be a bit tricky. Now, obviously, the resort's going to organise everything for you. But what I found was pretty much all the activities would start in the morning and then run to like lunchtime, early afternoon. And then you'd get back and you'd have the afternoon, which is maybe fine if you just want to chill out and relax by the pool. But if you're only there for a few days and you want to do 2 things in a day, then that's quite hard. So if you want to go and do the snorkeling, diving, and then do the walk in the afternoon, you can't really do that unless you've got transport, because you'll end up back at the resort and then they don't do the trip to do the hike in the afternoon. They only run it in the morning. So do think about that. And I tried to organise everything before I got there, and I arrived and nothing was organised. And then we organised everything. And I found that ask the question that you want the answer to, because I asked open questions and I got certain responses. And then I was like, well, but could I do this specific thing? They're like, oh, yes, you could do that. Okay, well, can we do that, please? So I got there and I was a bit disappointed that everything would be in the morning. And I said, well, yeah, if we did this, could we do this in the afternoon? Oh, yeah, we can arrange that. So, yeah, just it's worth persevering to make sure that you get the most out of your time there.
Got it.
So that's the second of the kind of short little trips you can do. The third one I talk about is Ovalau and Motuariki Islands. So these are off the west coast of Viti, Levu, a bit closer than Taveuni. And I visited these from Suva. So there are flights, but I got a boat across, which was quite cool. And the way I visited it is through Kauau Retreat, which is a beautiful... It's not a resort. It's David and Cloud who run it. It's more of like a retreat. They do yoga. It's a little bit of a hippie kind of vibe. You're the only guest there, basically. So if there's a group of you, I'd really recommend reaching out to them and organising something through them. But if you're like a solo traveller or a couple, that's not going to be possible. So because they did a weekend away, basically, from Suva. And we did a half-day hike on Motuariki Island. So Motuariki Island, which is an island off an island, it's home to the earliest sites where they found human skeletons in Fiji. So they found 3,000-year-old skeletons there. And it is very authentic Fijian. There's no mains electricity. There's no cars. There's no roads. And so we basically walked between a couple of villages. And then we finished off with a lunch with the village, which involved a kava, which I'll talk about a bit later, food and dancing. And the first 2 or 3 hours are really enjoyable. And then it's like, these guys are going to go all day. Like, how do we get out of it? Like, we enjoy it. Like, they're very hospitable, lovely people, but yeah, it was quite full on. So after about 4 hours, we managed to escape back to the retreat.
You may have heard about Built as the loyalty program that lets you earn points on rent wherever you live. Well, they just leveled up even more. As of 2026, homeowners can also earn up to 1.25x points on their mortgage payments. This is thanks to Built's 3 new credit cards, the Palladium card, Obsidian card, and Blue card. All 3 turn your housing payments, rent or mortgage, into flexible rewards, so you can choose the card that fits your lifestyle without missing out on points and exclusive benefits. Built points can be redeemed at top airlines and hotels, Amazon.com purchases, future rent payments, and more. Built points have also been ranked by top publications as the industry's most valuable point currency. Your housing payment is already your biggest expense. Make it your most rewarding. Find the card that fits your lifestyle and apply today at joinbuilt.com/traveler. That's joinbilt.com/traveler. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Terms and limitations apply. Subject to approval and eligibility, Built cards are issued by Column NA, member FDIC, pursuant to license from MasterCard International, Incorporated. Are you the type of person who has always been deep into travel research, saving hotels, building itineraries, sending recommendations to friends, and at some point you thought to yourself, why am I not getting paid for this? That's where Fora comes in. Fora is a modern travel agency designed for people who want to turn their passion for travel planning into a real business. Fora's tech, training, and community give you everything you need to start earning. With a network of over 7,000 preferred travel partners, Fora gives you the ability to offer clients VIP perks like upgrades, resort credits, and late checkout, helping you deliver standout experiences and build a business people come back to. It's time you turn your passion for travel into a business with Fora. Become a Fora advisor today at foratravel.com/traveler. That's FORA travel.com/traveler. And make sure you tell them we sent you, foratravel.com/traveler. And thanks to Fora for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
So one of the things about villages
in my impression is Monterey, in terms of scale, is you could walk around the entire island if there were beaches that actually went all the way around the island, if it weren't so rugged. It's not
correct.
very big.
Yeah. I mean, there's reasonably well-worn paths between the villages because that's how the locals get around.
Yeah.
I mean, generally they often use boats to get around. But yeah, it's not a large island by any means. Now, something to consider around Fiji, so it's Melanesian. So it's the same cultural group as Papua New Guinea and the Solomons. It's the most eastern Melanesian, and then you start getting into kind of Polynesia, which is Tonga and Samoa. So they look quite different, and culturally it is a bit different. So when you're visiting villages, again, you don't just rock up. You need to have permission from the chief of the village. You need to dress modestly. So you need to cover your shoulders and your knees. So often people will take like a shawl that they can put on when they get into the village. You need to take sunglasses off and your hat off. And they need a little bit of organizing. You just don't rock up.
And when you say cover your knees, are you wearing long pants or are you wearing longer shorts or...
I'm wearing the very start. So I'm wearing short shorts for hiking, and then I'm putting a lava or a sarong around my knees, basically, to cover them up. So that's the kind of the way it works in the villages. And then kava. Now, have you been to Fiji, Chris?
No, I have not.
Have you drank kava?
I have not.
They love the kava. It's a root. Basically, it's a root, and the older the root, I think they grow for maybe up to 5 or 7 years, the root gets longer, and that's the kind of the better quality. And then they grind it up, and then they put it with water, and then it has a mild stimulant kind of effect. You're not going to get drunk like alcohol, but you are going to get a bit of a kava kind of buzz from it. I mean, it was interesting when my wife went to some international conferences, COP actually, in Brazil. The Fijians took kava with them so they could drink it there. I don't know how they got it through customs, but they took some tree roots with them and then they ground them up and used them there. So it is very large part of Fijian culture is kava. And it's a way they welcome you into a kind of social event. And so there's a bit of a routine or kind of protocol around it. So you get it's quite a large but very shallow wooden bowl, and it's a communal bowl. And you clap once, and then you say bula, which means life in Fijian, which is the kind of welcome. So people say bula to you, it's hello, it means life. It's not a bula, it's a bula. You have to say it with a bit of emphasis. And so you drink what you're given in one go. Oh, sorry, they get a little cup off the main bowl. I don't know how to do it. But yeah, so you drink it in one go, and then you do 3 claps after that, and then they pass the bowl around. So the locals will kind of sit there and just keep passing the bowl around all afternoon potentially. So if you don't want any more, just say no, but that's the kind of protocol for drinking kava. Now I have to say it looks and it tastes like dirty water because effectively it is water and a ground up root. So it's not got taste to it, but it does have a bit of an effect. So that's the kind of kava culture. Then the other reason to visit Ovalau Island is Levuka. So this was Fiji's first colonial capital when the British moved there, only for 8 years in the late 1800s. But it's Fiji's only UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's not the best maintained World Heritage Site I've ever been to. It's pretty run down, but it's quite atmospheric. And it very much felt to me like some of the colonial towns in New Zealand or Australia, because it's similar kind of era. You've got the tin roofs and wooden buildings. And it's a pleasant place to explore for a couple of hours. There's nothing kind of major sites, but it's just a pleasant place. And then the last thing we did there was we did some of the best snorkeling I've ever done in Fiji. And that was just because David, who runs the Kauai retreat, he knows the right spots to go to. So if you go with some locals who know where the right spots are, there are some amazing snorkeling opportunities in Fiji.
Cool. When you say best snorkeling, what does one see on the best snorkeling you've ever done?
So am I seeing just a lot of colorful fish, or am I seeing sharks or turtles or rays or...
Your standards, Chris. Like, I'm just seeing some beautiful, colourful fish. Like, that's all there is. Like,
Beautiful
you
colour
want
fish
the
are
manta
great.
rays, you want the whale sharks. Do you? Okay. Well,
No. Just looking for
snorkeling
some
snob.
definition here for people who don't know your diving experience, your snorkeling experience here.
Okay. If you go to certain places, which I didn't go to in Fiji, you can see turtles. You can do shark diving, which episode 841, you had a guest who talked about shark diving. And Exactly. So there are those opportunities to do it. I prefer things that are not potentially going to nibble me or eat me, so the smaller fish are good. But you do see... So I've done the snorkeling in Samoa. I've done it in Timor-Leste, which was fantastic. Really good coral. So Fiji, you get very good coral, particularly soft corals. So these are sort of...
And
ones
when you
that
say
kind of
soft
move.
corals, I think I'm used to hard corals. What does a soft coral look like, or what's the difference?
A soft coral will move with the currents, where the hard coral won't move.
Got it.
It's a made-up technical definition, but often things like
that was actually helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. It's like a fan coral. So the ones that kind of stick out and you see them swaying about a bit with the currents. And it's these ones that look, they call it cabbage patches, and they look like these just fields of giant cabbages on the bottom of the ocean. So those are kind of soft corals. And so there's a lot of really fantastic soft corals and lots of schools of fish, lots of color, reasonable size schools of fish. The one I really enjoyed on that bit by Ovalau was there was a mount, so where this kind of rocky outcropping is coming off the seabed, and then the top of it was just, there was so much life. There was so many fish and so much color and coral, and it was so shallow. Just really fantastic experience doing the snorkeling there.
Cool. That's helpful. The reason I asked the question is I had, for instance, really great snorkeling in Belize, but it was very different from the really great snorkeling I've had in Hawaii, almost completely different. No corals, not that many colorful fish, but lots of big things, where Hawaii was the opposite. So it's useful to understand what to expect.
Correct. Yeah. Now, the final of the four little things I'm going to talk about is a drive around Viti Levu, so the largest island. This probably takes 4 to 5 days. The other trips I've described, you could do anywhere from 2 days up to however long you want to spend at the resort, but probably 2 to 3 days. You can see and do most things. What I found actually when we did the Yasawas, we spent 5 nights at the resort because they have a deal in the off season where you get half price accommodation if you do a 5-night booking. But when I got there, I realized that nobody does 5 nights in the same resort. They will do 2 nights at one resort, they'll do 2 nights at another resort, they'll do 2 nights at another resort, they'll do this whole kind of island hopping thing. Is the way you kind of see those, because there's not a lot around. In a couple of days, you've done the snorkeling in local reefs and done those sort of things. If you're on the mainland or the big island, Viti Levu, people will go there for a week or 2 weeks, but that's very much just a fly and flop, sit by the pool in a resort. So Viti Levu's got the most things to talk about, but it's probably my least favorite of those 4 trips. Those ones had really good snorkeling, there's a bit of hiking. There's obviously more stuff on the main island, but I think true Fiji, there's actually far fewer snorkeling sites off the main island than you'd expect, and there's far fewer nice beaches than you'd expect. So I think the prettiest classic images you'd think of a tropical island are more on the offshore islands rather than on the main island. So coming into Nandi, so that says that there's the tourism hub, because that's where the airport is and where the boat's going out to the Mamanukas and the Yasawa Islands. There's also the man-made Denaru. That's probably the best known resort in Fiji, Denaru, because it's right by Nandi. It's like 10 minutes from the airport. Now, the whole thing is man-made on reclaimed mud flats. Just to manage expectations, if you go in there expecting white sandy beaches and amazing snorkeling, it's a mud flat with the poor visibility if you go in the water. So there are some nice hotels there and you sit by the pool, but it is very much a man-made kind of construct. Okay. And then in Nandi itself, there's a few things to see. There's the Sabram Iua temple, which is the largest Hindu temple in the Pacific. So as I said, a third of the population are Indo-Fijian. A large proportion of those are Hindu. There's also a large number of Muslims. If you've been to India, or even if you've been to Singapore, or if you've seen a Hindu temple, they're very colourful, very photogenic kind of places. So that's worth a visit. There's the Garden of Sleeping Giant, which is quite pleasant managed gardens. There's the Sabeto Hot Springs and Mud Pool, which I didn't go to because my experience with mud pools in New Zealand, this is one where you cover yourself in mud and it's meant to have really good healing properties and then you wash it all off. my experience in New Zealand was all the clothing that I wore after that experience was completely ruined and wasn't wearable again because the smell of the sulfur and the mud was as overpowering. Even after you washed it half a dozen times, I still couldn't get it out. So I was a bit cautious around that. But if you want to have that experience, that's available. And there's also the Sisise Historic Village. So this is where they say that the first Fijians landed, where their first kind of waka or boats landed. It's a bit touristy, to be honest. We went there, we get out the car, they go, well, that'd be $10, please. You're like, okay. And then there's a bit of a green square and there's a church, and it's very much set up for, this is where the resorts go and do their village tours. So it is quite a managed experience. And that's one thing I found about Fiji, particularly after being in Timor-Leste for a year. In Timor, nothing's managed. It's all very raw and as it is, whereas in Fiji they've had tourists for decades. It's been a big popular tourist destination, probably a bit like places in Hawaii. They're very familiar. This is what their service and the products they offer, and this is what you do. You're not going freestyle there.
Okay.
And then driving around the island, if you're going to go in a anti-clockwise direction, so from Nandi you drive down south along the Coral Coast. As I mentioned, that's home to a lot of resorts. I think that was where they originally developed, and then they've started going out into the islands a bit more, but there are definitely a lot of big resorts along the Coral Coast. Snorkeling is reasonable. It's definitely not as good as the offshore islands. There's the Sikatoka sand dunes, which have got 20 to 60 meter high sand dunes, which are quite impressive for walking around. You might be able to boogie board down the side. And there's also some rafting possible on the rivers there. And then driving along there for probably 3-4 hours, you're going to get to Pacific Harbour. Now, this is the adventure capital of Fiji. That's the reputation. Again, there's beaches, there's resorts, there's some whitewater rafting, you can jet ski. This is where you get to go to Benka Island, which is the one covered in episode 841, talking about shark diving. Now, I didn't go shark diving, but I did speak to people who had, and they said they feed the sharks, so that I'm not so keen on because it is very much changing their kind of natural behavior. They will say it's safe, but actually guides do get bitten and guests have heart attacks. So you can imagine, like, if you're... So just, I mean, I'm not saying like everybody's going to have a heart attack, but it's definitely a risk. Like if you've got any heart conditions, or if you've never had a shark swimming up to a large shark underwater before, just think how you might respond to that. And so that is just something to consider.
Well, I remember Jason talking about it in that episode, peering over the ridge and seeing just a mass of sharks. And yeah, I think I would be one of those guests with a heart attack potentially.
So you can do that if you want. It's an adventure kind of place. It's not for me, but obviously attracts quite a few people. And then moving on to Suva. So this was Fiji's capital since 1882 after Levu. It's quite a big place. It's actually probably one of the biggest cities in the South Pacific. So there's about 330,000 people live in Suva and the surrounding neighborhoods. So it's quite sizable. So basically a third of Fijians live in Suva. And it's the classic... Okay. Yeah, so it's quite a big place. It's a really big hub for education. So there's the University of the South Pacific, which is headquartered in Suva, although they do have bases in Samoa and other kind of Pacific islands. So I think there's something like 30 or 40,000 students in Suva, and they're from all over the Pacific. And I remember seeing quite a few American students who go over there for a semester as part of their course. So it's a pretty decent sized place. The city centre is quite relaxed and walkable. It's got quite a few colonial kind of era buildings around. It isn't necessarily what you think of when you think of Fiji. So whenever I'd say to people, I'm like, oh, I've been living in Fiji for 6 months, they're all like, oh, amazing. And I'm like, yeah, it's an hour to the nearest beach. Like there is no snorkeling or diving. Like it's all a lot of the things that people go to Fiji to do, you can't do in Suva. It's a very shallow harbour, and it's one of the biggest ports in the South Pacific, so the waters, you don't want to be getting in the water, basically. But it's fine for a couple of days. I think 6 months was definitely my fill, but if you travelling through the car, doing a trip around the island, there's probably enough to fill a couple of days. So there's lots of churches. Christianity is very big in Fiji. Quite a few Hindu temples. There's quite a few mosques. There's a Mormon temple, quite a substantial Mormon temple, actually, on top of the hill. There's a Sikh temple. There's Hare Krishna temple. And so Fiji is home to the largest Hare Krishna population in the world per capita. It shows the kind of multicultural nature of Fiji, which works quite well. The Suva Municipal Market is definitely worth a look through. I've been to a few in the Pacific. It's a large market area. It's very colourful. It's pretty straightforward because all the prices are on display, so you don't have to do any haggling. I do find it amazing. You go to the banana stall and there's the $2 bananas, the $3 bananas, the $5 bananas, the $7 bananas. They've differentiated out based on their ripeness and size, all the different kind of price points of bananas. So yeah, that's kind of worth a little bit of a look around. The seawall, so that's what I would do pretty much every day when I was there. I'd go for a walk around the seawall. So Suva is on a kind of a peninsula that sticks out. And if you walk from the Suva CBD on the western side where the port is, round to the eastern side where the university is, it's about maybe a 6 or 7 kilometer walk, and you can get a bus back into the centre. It's very pleasant. It's very well maintained. There's nice wide footpaths. Because it's very tidal, when the tide's out, you can see lots of little crabs in the mud. When the tide's in, there's a few fish around. That's where the locals go to hang out. So I remember going out one morning and there was this elderly gentleman and he had a lot of security around him. And I was like, what's going on there? And then when I got home, I was like, that's the president of Fiji just going for a morning walk along the waterfront. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's probably my favourite kind of spot for walking up. There's no shade, really. Fiji is a tropical climate. It's hot, so just be careful around the sun. The only 2 places, really, that you can go hiking is 20 minutes north from Suva is Dula Isuva, which is got beautiful swimming holes and some bushwalks. And so that's a popular place to head out to. You can get there on a bus. It's a lot easier if you've got your own transport to drive out. And that's very pleasant. And there's Mount Kurubaba, which is up very steeply through rainforest. There's no views until you get to top, but from the top you get quite spectacular views of the neighborhood, looking out to Suva and along the south coast. But it is clay, and I've walked it. I did it 3 times. Even after it had been dry for a whole week, it was still very slippery, and I did it in rain and it was incredibly slippery, so it was quite stressful actually, because it's very steep, slippery, you're holding onto tree branches and roots trying to hide up, and it's not marked, and it starts behind a cement works. So that's the direction. You get off at the cement works and you go around the back of the big cement silos, and there's a little track running up into the bush, and so you go up there. So it's probably not for inexperienced hikers, but it is a bit of an experience.
But it looks like it would have great views of from there.
It does if it's not rainy or cloudy. So I've done it 3 times. The first time I did it, I just sat up on the top in the rain and didn't see a thing. And then I came back the second time, the third time, and I did get some views. So because it's noticeable when you're in Suva that although Suva's probably got the worst weather of any city in Fiji, it tends to be wetter and cloudier than many parts of Fiji. Mm-hmm. It's often clearer on the Suva Peninsula where the city is, and you look back towards the rest of the island and it's all the clouds, all the hills are in cloud. So you just have to pick the right day to kind of head up.
There are things in life you don't want to be transparent, like your swimsuit or your search history. But when it comes to your wireless bill, transparency is everything. That's why Mint Mobile's wireless plans have no gimmicks and no gotchas. Just high-speed data and reliable coverage on the T-Mobile 5G network. And right now, all plans are $15 per month, even unlimited. And that's one of the reasons I was looking into Mint Mobile even before they approached me about being a sponsor. Because I was transitioning from high tech to being a travel journalist and wanted to save money on my monthly bills. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/traveler. That's mintmobile.com/traveler. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/traveler. That's it. There's no catch. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months, plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy, including up to 20 gigabyte hotspot. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com for more information. And thanks to Mint Mobile for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. You've heard me talk about OneSkin before, and whether you're someone who tries every new skincare product that hits the market, or you've been using the same thing or 2 things for years, at some point, most of us realize our skin just isn't keeping up with the way it used to. As we age, some skin cells stop functioning the way they should. Longevity scientists call them zombie cells, and they're a major driver of visible signs of aging. And with summer here, that matters even more because up to 80% of visible skin aging is linked to sun exposure. That's why OneSkin's new limited edition summer bundles have you covered. They pair OneSkin's skincare essentials with SPF products, So the OS1 peptide can help address the visible signs of UV aging, while SPF helps protect against future damage. It's a complete system to help summer-proof your skin, so be sure to check out the summer bundles before they're gone. I'm spending more time these days thinking about skincare and about sun protection. Born from over a decade of longevity research, OneSkin is helping you unlock your healthiest skin now and as you age. For a limited time, try OneSkin with 15% off code TRAVELER at oneskin.co/traveler. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code TRAVELER. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support this show and tell them I sent you. And thanks to OneSkin for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Well, and you were mentioning in terms of doing the excursions out of town that it will work better if you have your own car. My impression was you were recommending renting a car for this round the island trip.
Oh, definitely. Sorry. So in terms of getting around, there are buses which go between Suva and Nandi. It's like 3 or 4 a day. But those are kind of commuter buses. And then there's local buses, particularly from Suva's got quite a reasonable bus network. Although interestingly, when I got to Suva, I thought, okay, well, because we were volunteering, we didn't have a car. It's expensive to buy one as a kind of expat or visitor. And so I was like, okay, well, let's try the buses. Where's the bus map? There must be a map of where do the buses go. And they're like, no, there's no bus map. I'm like, well, where do the buses go? They're like, well, the locals know and the foreigners don't use the buses. So I was like, okay, that's helpful. So I had a bit of time in my hands. My assignment took a little bit of time to start. So my first couple of weeks in Suva, I would go down to the bus station and I would just get on a random bus and I would turn Strava on my phone. There isn't, I think Strava's missing an opportunity.
To get the map of where you're going. Okay.
Exactly. I mean, Strava, you can pick your hiking, your cycling, or for some reason they haven't got bus riding as a sport. So I picked,
sport.
Exactly. So I picked something random like cross-country skiing. And I just went, right, Strava, it's cross-country skiing, record my route on this bus. And then I just sat on the bus until it got to the end, and the bus driver was a bit like, are you going to get off? And I'm like, no, I need to go back to Suva. So I just stay on the bus and come back to Suva. And then I made a little Google map, which has got, I think, 12 or 13 of the main bus routes in Suva and where the buses go. There's some crazy bus routes. Like, they don't seem to believe in an efficient route planning for some of the places. They would literally go down these cul-de-sacs and end up having to do like a 15-point Austin Powers-esque sort of turn at the end in this cul-de-sac, and then they'll go into another cul-de-sac and do another 15-point turn in this giant bus, and then another cul-de-sac, and then they'll head back into Suva. So, but the buses are quite good fun. They're cheap. They're all using a transport card, so you can buy that from the bus stations. There's no money involved, and they've got natural air conditioning, i.e. there's no windows.
Okay.
So that's actually ideal. But they've got plastic sheets. Like in a restaurant, if it starts raining, they put the blinds down. They've got those on the side in case it rains. And so actually, they're a lot more comfortable than ones in Timor-Leste. I'll say that. But in common with the ones in Timor and in Samoa, and I guess a lot of developing world countries, they love the very loud music. The music is... And the music's very loud, and they've put speakers... Because I thought, well, maybe if I sit at the back of the bus, better. No, they've got like 8 speakers strategically located across the roof of the bus. So anywhere you sit, you get perfect loud volume music. So that was the kind of downside of the buses. But you don't see any tourists on the buses.
Noise cancelling headphones is what I'm hearing you say. But
even with that, because the music, it's not classical music loud. It's like oof, 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 oof music. Even the noise cancelling struggles with that. Anyway, so the buses are good if you just want a bit of a local experience.
I would mock you for getting on random buses, but I'm trying to think of where I have done that, where the buses had Wi-Fi. And I remember getting on random buses and just checking my mail out as we drove into the countryside, with no idea where I was going.
I'm just thinking some of the buses, it would be a 2-hour round trip, and there's no toilets or anything. So you have to sort of plan ahead.
Plan your account.
Exactly. So, buses are an experience. Actually, an expat who's lived in Suva for a long time, who's been on CNN Travel and various things talking about Suva, they say, what is the best thing to do in Suva? And she always says, go to the cinema, which to me demonstrates there's not a lot going on in Suva. The cinema is the best thing to do. But there is some nice air-conditioned cinemas, and the Fijians love... I'm not into horror movies, but they get very into the movie. There's laughing and clapping, and they really get involved. So I think if you saw like a horror movie or a comedy in Fiji, that would be another kind of cool, slightly different experience.
Okay.
I mean,
more of a cultural experience there than here, it sounds like.
Correct. I mean, the more classic kind of tourist experience, particularly for those on cruise ships, so cruise ships do come into Suva, is to go to Fiji Museum, which is a good museum. It tells the story of Fiji quite well. It's got some nice exhibits. That's definitely worth an explore. Fiji Museum's in Thurston Gardens, which they call a botanical gardens. It's not really. It's quite small, but the trees are just beautiful. There's lots of shade. It's quite well maintained. It's a very pleasant place. And Thurston Gardens
and that's right by the presidential palace.
Correct. So there's the government house grounds, which are also very pleasant, just to the east of there. And that's home to giant fruit bats. So that's pretty cool, particularly at dawn and dusk, because they're the most active. So there's some trees and you'll just see these massive bats flying around. So that's you're like, well, I'm not in canvas anymore.
So we're talking about bats with something like an 18-inch, 2-foot wingspan?
Up to, yeah. They're pretty big. So they're pretty cool to see fly around. They make a quite distinctive noise. Then the other side of that is Albert Park, which is a sports ground. And it's basically like epicenter of Fiji, I would say, is Albert Park, because the next Albert Park on the other side is the Parliament building. So the Parliament of Fiji, which was built in the 1930s, quite a grand building. To the south end, you've got the, I'll get my directions mixed up, but they've got the Grand Pacific Hotel, which was quite one of the flashiest kind of places to stay in town. But Albert Park is pretty much always in use. So Fijians love their rugby. And so there was always rugby games playing there. And then Fijian Indians obviously love their cricket. So they're often playing cricket there. And if they have any big kind of events, often they'll use Albert Park. So that's a really good place, again, to see what Fijians do in their spare time. And then one thing I'll mention, which I don't think any other tourist itinerary will talk about in Suva, I've never been anywhere with as many abandoned and shipwrecked boats in the harbour. Because there's no real rules or regulations or deposits or things that encourage people to dispose of their ships in an environmentally friendly fashion. And they've also had a few storms through. So there's one which is a bit of a landmark. You see it's always there. You see this reasonable sized ship stuck on a reef in the harbour. And it basically, there was a big cyclone came through and it put the boat on the reef and it's been stuck there ever since. And so right actually by Suva Harbour and also around by Lamy, which is near where the cement works and the Mount Kurabao hike is. So there's about a dozen shipwrecked ships there. So if you have a drone flying in Fiji is relatively straightforward. You do need to get a permit, but you can do that online and it's pretty much authorized straight away. And then you can fly your drone. You obviously stay away from airports, but otherwise you can fly your drone around. And so that's a really good way of going out to it. And I've even known locals who have used kayaks and kayaked out to these shipwrecks because some of them are sticking out of the water. So that's interesting if you like that kind of thing. Somewhere that not all tourists go to unless they're going with a guide is to the Reserve Bank of Fiji, which is next to the Catholic Cathedral, which is one of the biggest, most impressive kind of churches in town. In the Reserve Bank, they've got a shop and you can buy currency. And Fiji, a few years ago, to commemorate the Rugby Sevens, introduced a $7 note. And so there's not many countries with a $7 note, so you can buy those. It's not, it's a fairly unobvious building, but yeah, once you go inside, it's pretty well set up, and they've got a nice display of lots of different kind of Fijian notes. So that's Suva, and then heading north, so continuing in an anti-clockwise direction, you go up to Raki Raki, and you drive along King's Road, which is quite scenic. There's not a lot of places to stop at. That's one of the things I found about Fiji relative to, say, Samoa, which is smaller. I found in Samoa pretty much like every 1 or 2 hours, probably even less actually, there would be things that would be worth stopping off to do. There'll be a waterfall, there'll be a swimming hole, there'll be a church, there'll be something interesting. I found in Fiji I could drive for quite a long time before I got somewhere of interest. You're obviously going through the villages, but you're not going to stop off and wander around the villages as previously discussed. But if you're heading up towards Raki Raki, there's the St. Francis of Xavier Church, or Church of the Black Christ, which is in a very scenic spot on top of the hill. And then Raki Raki, I went there actually about 10, 15 years ago to a resort called Volley Volley, and the snorkeling and diving from there was fantastic. So that's a good spot for snorkeling and diving. And then continue around the top of the island. It's scenic driving, nice coastal scenery, tropical kind of landscapes, but there's not a lot of places to stop at. And then you come around to Lautoka, which is the second largest city in Fiji, home to around 80,000 people. And that is interesting, actually. So the west coast of Viti Levu is very dry. Like it wasn't what I was expecting. When I landed into Nandi, you're not landing into tropical rainforest. It's a very almost pastoral. They've obviously done a lot of agriculture. It's quite a managed kind of landscape. And then as you drive east towards Suva, there's a point, particularly around Pacific Harbour, where it gets noticeably greener, lusher, more tropical. It's a lot better on that side of the island. So on the west coast, that's the home of the sugar cane industry. So in the middle of Latoka, there's
okay.
this huge sugar processing plant, which looks pretty good from the air using my drone. There's not a lot there as a tourist, to be honest. There's small botanic gardens and there's quite a nice Hare Krishna temple. But otherwise, that's kind of Latoka. Latoka's only maybe an hour north from Nandi, and then you've kind of completed the loop.
Very good. Excellent. You promised me 3 trips, and I think you've given me all 3.
4.
But you still wanted to say something about food, I think.
I do, yes. So a few different bits and bobs. Obviously, lots of Western dishes, particularly resorts. Local food, very heavy on coconut, taro, cassava, and fresh seafood. The best known kind of local way of eating is called a Levu, which is a bit like a hangi in New Zealand, where they cook under the ground. So they make like an earth oven. So that's quite tasty. What I'd recommend people try is kokoda, which is raw fish marinated in coconut cream. So a bit like ceviche.
Oh, ceviche. Okay.
Yeah. So ceviche in South America, fresh fish with lots of kind of herbs and things. Kokoda is similar. It's kind of fresh fish, or I guess you could say sushi, but marinated in coconut cream. So that's quite tasty. To be honest, if you're looking for restaurants in towns, they're pretty much all fast food or Indian restaurants. Like the best food I found in Fiji was in the resorts. They're very much a couple separate to what places locals would eat at. In terms of getting to Fiji,
were they good Indian restaurants in the town?
They're fine. Like, they're not gourmet, but they're fine. It seems to be the most popular thing out there is either kind of chicken and chips, fast food joints, or Indian restaurants. Most of those will be vegetarian.
Okay.
There is a Vietnamese place in Suva, but there's not a lot of variety of foods around. Oh, there's a few Thai places. But yeah, Fiji is a relatively poor country, and people who are eating out are the tourists, and most of the tourists are in the resorts. So that's where the better food tends to be. I mean, it's actually quite amazing. Like, we're out in the Yasawas. It's quite remote. It's probably always about 4 or 5 hours by boat to get there. And the food there was amazing. And like, well, we live in the biggest city in the country and we're not getting this food there, but you can get it in those places because that's where the demand is. In terms of getting there, as I say, Fiji is the best connected Pacific island. So there's direct flights between Nadi and New Zealand, Australia, Vancouver, Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong, and the US. From the US, you can go from Honolulu, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Dallas, Fort Worth. This was pre the flight issues at the moment. So some of those flights, I think, for example, Fiji Airways have stopped flying from Dallas, but hopefully those flights will return once things, if they ever return to normal. Fiji Airways is the main airline. I would say they're not my favorite. I took 6 flights with them, and 3 of which were delayed. One was delayed by 23 hours, and they rescheduled it 6 times. So they're not my favorite airline, but they may be the only airline. And I've heard that from other people. Things can get rescheduled and the communications aren't amazing. Their new planes are comfortable. Their in-flight crew are excellent, very hospitable. The food is a bit average. But yeah, so Fiji Airways is probably the best connected to the Pacific Airlines. And then Air New Zealand fly there, Qantas fly there. So yeah, there's a lot of connections into Nadi. Getting around, I say renting a car is relatively straightforward. There's relatively light traffic. Most of the main roads are sealed. Motorbikes aren't a thing in the Pacific, so you just have to worry about other cars. The resorts will generally organise transport to pick you up from the hotel and drop you off at the hotel. Getting between the islands, there are ferries between most of them, but they often take quite a long time. And so tourists will generally fly. So domestic flights are pretty good. They mostly go from Nadi. I found Suva, even though it's the capital, is not very well connected. You'd often have to fly from Suva to Nadi to go from Nadi back over Suva to get where you needed to get to.
Okay.
In terms of safety, if you're in a resort, it's perfectly safe. You're fine. If you're in downtown Nadi or Suva after dark, you want to be careful, particularly in the bigger cities, as is often the way. Lots of people from the villages have come into the city. There's high unemployment. There are some issues with drug use. The advice we got whilst we're volunteering there was, just at night, take taxis, especially in Suva, to some degree in Nadi. There's plenty of taxis around. They're very cheap. The locals use the taxis. That's the best way of getting around after dark. And obviously, as we talked about, you probably spend quite a lot of time in the water. So just take your usual precautions in terms of water safety. I say Fiji, because it's served tourists, they'll have life jackets. Like, it's not Timor where it's Wild West or Papua New Guinea. Like, they're set up for the things. The boats are pretty decent, relatively new boats. In terms of language, so 3 official languages. You've got English, Fijian, and Fiji Hindi. And pretty much everybody where the tourists go will speak English. But if you go outside of that, so going into some of the villages, they won't speak any English, potentially. But it is a lot easier than other places I've found in the Pacific where English isn't as widely spoken. In terms of costs, it is not a cheap holiday, I'd say that, because it's all resorts. And typically the only places you can eat are at the resort. So you pay for the room, and then you pay for the meal plan, and then you pay for the activities. So it can kind of add up quite quickly. Actually getting out, because a lot of the resorts are out on the islands, you need to pay for the boats, and with fuel being expensive, it's quite expensive to get those little boats out and about. Now, if you've got the money, you can spend thousands of dollars a night, tens of thousands of dollars a night on some very high-end resorts where you get a whole island to yourself. But as I say, it's not really a backpacker's destination. Some of the resorts do have the dorm room style, but even just the transport getting around things, that is going to be a significant part of your overall trip costs. And so Fiji, I found it actually quite a lot more expensive than Samoa. So just if you're thinking about where you want to go in the Pacific, those are things to consider. Internet is pretty good, though. There's Vodafone and Digicel, the two options. You can get eSIMs or a SIM card. Most resorts will give you Wi-Fi. The signal's patchy outside of the main settlements, but fine in the Nandi and Suas of the world. Climate is tropical. So basically, it's the same temperature all year round. It's really the humidity that changes. So in the wet season, which is November to April, it's really humid. Like, I'd go put my washing out, and I'd come back, and my wife would be like, "Where have you been?" I'm like, "I've been outside for 10 minutes hanging out the washing. My shirt is completely soaked through. I am dripping with sweat. This is ridiculous." At 9 o'clock in the morning. I found the humidity was probably actually worse first thing, and then it burnt off slightly. But I do think when to visit. So the dry season when most people will visit is between May and October. Then obviously that's when it's going to be busier and more expensive, but it's certainly a more pleasant then. Let's say if you go in the wet season, they do special deals, so it can be a bit cheaper. And then the only other thing to say is snorkeling gear, resorts will have some you can hire, but it's generally best to bring your own. Make sure you got a mask that fits. In terms of money, resorts will accept credit cards, but if you're outside a resort, generally not. It's generally better to have cash. There's plenty of ATMs in the cities. There's almost none outside of the cities. If you're looking for some nightlife, Nandi and Denarau have a little bit, but it's not really a nightlife kind of destination. And that's what I have to say about Fiji.
Excellent. I think you've done it. So shall we jump into our wrap-up questions then? You're standing in the prettiest spot of all the places you went in Fiji. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I think the snorkeling off Ovalau Island, the locals called it the aquarium, and it lived up to that name.
Very cool.
But I have to say, the snorkeling off the Yasawas, Ovalau I'm just putting because that was like my 100% top, but the Yasawas was like 95%. Like, it was pretty close. Like, it was the best place I've been. Timor-Leste, I think, arguably had the coral life in Timor is healthier, but the coral life in Fiji is still very good, and there was more fish around.
Got it. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Fiji.
So there's an island, one of the 330 islands in Fiji is called Rotoma. And it's 465 kilometers north of the rest of Fiji. So it's weird. If you look at a map, you've got Fiji and you've got Rotoma, which is quite a long way north. And it's actually more culturally Polynesian than Melanesian. And it's only home to about 1,500 people. So in 1985, they had a referendum. And 85% of the population voted against allowing organized tourism on the island. So even though Fiji is a tourist hub of the Pacific, Rotoma, there are no tourists. And you can't visit as a tourist. You can get there by flights, but you need to have an invite from families on the island, or they're often expats revisiting their home. So it's interesting that the most touristic place in the South Pacific has islands where tourism is banned.
Interesting. And if you had to summarize Fiji in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Say tropical, aquatic, and established.
Excellent. So normally at this point we'd wrap up, but Jonty had a word to say about next year's amateur traveler trip to Bolivia.
I'm slightly envious because I've been to 85 countries. Bolivia is my 3rd favorite country I've ever visited, behind Iran, obviously not now, and Australia. So I had a fantastic time in Bolivia. So if anybody's thinking of doing a trip with Chris or hasn't visited, I would really recommend it. It's one of the less well-visited South American countries. A lot of people go to Peru, but Bolivia's next door and is arguably more interesting and diverse. So La Paz, where you're flying to, is just a crazy city. There's all these cable cars everywhere. It's very mountainous. You go to markets where they're selling llama fetuses for use in traditional activities.
Yeah.
There's some massive markets. I remember going to one of the largest markets in South America on a cable car. So you're cable carring over the top of the market and you get to see everything below. Like, only in Bolivia. Sucre, which is the constitutional capital, is just beautiful, lots of colonial buildings, very nice, and it's a lot lower down in terms of altitude. So La Paz is pretty high up, 3,000 meters-ish. So Sucre is lower down, it's warmer, it's just a lovely, pleasant place to stay. Patazi, which is even higher, is where basically the entire wealth of the Spanish Empire came from. So anybody interested in history would find that place fascinating.
The silver mines, yeah.
The silver mines are amazing. If you go inside them, it's an experience. It's not necessarily for everybody, but it's quite fascinating. The fact there are still people mining there in some pretty atrocious conditions. And then the salt flats. People go to Bolivia to see the salt flats, and the salt flats are amazing. What I wasn't expecting is in the middle of the salt flats, there's an island filled with giant cacti. Like, I was not expecting this. Very surreal. And then, actually, interesting, near the salt flats, or just south of them, actually, you've got effectively the Atacama Desert. So the Atacama Desert in northern Chile. Yeah. I just thought, we're going to the salt flats for 3 days. Actually, we spent 1 day in the salt flats, and then we're going out to the desert. There was hot springs. There's amazing volcanoes. There's these beautiful lakes, which are blue and bright pink and green, and they're full of flamingos. And so I just remember standing there and going, my brain, I can't, there's a volcano and there's this like bright green lake and there's flamingos and I just can't process this. Oh, and this is also where quinoa, the healthy food, that's also grown around there because it grows in very dry, arid environments. So just very surreal. So in the trip, I think it's 11 days, you get to see such a diversity of things, and they're things you can only either see there or there's not many places where you get that kind of combination of places to see. So yeah, I think you and the rest of the people who join you will have a fantastic time in Bolivia.
Well, and thank you for the ad. Just send me your invoice when you get around to it. So our guest again has been Jonty Crane from JontyTravels.com, who appears with no payment on Amateur Traveler from time to time here. And check out his site, although you'll have to wait a year after he goes someplace until the blog post shows up. But.
Oh, I do have one post actually about Suva. If you want to move to Suva, that's what I actually put up straight away. So I've got a whole like things you need to know if you want to live in Suva. And if you're interested in seeing the bus map that I mentioned earlier, there's a link to it on there.
Excellent. Jonty, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and telling us about your love for Fiji.
Thank you.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
This summer, Prime Video takes you back before Legally Blonde, before law school, and into the world of Elle Woods in high school. Set in 1995, this Gemini vegetarian knows exactly who she is until her family moves from Bel Air to Seattle. Packed with iconic fashion, 90s nostalgia, and a throwback soundtrack, Elle proves one thing. Law school was hard. High school was harder. From the world of Legally Blonde, watch Elle, a new original series only on Prime Video. Watch now.
In case anyone had trouble telling, I enjoy having Jonty as a guest on the show, so special thanks to Jonty and to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler. If you're interested in learning how you can become a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/Amateur Traveler. Also, special thanks to New York Times, who just did a shout out to Amateur Traveler in an article called 6 Different Travel Podcasts You Should Listen to. I completely agree with them. I have a comment on the show we did recently on Paris, and it's from me because my wife and I were just in Paris on the way to a European Waterways luxury barge cruise, which you'll hear more about in the future. But we stopped on the way in Paris, and one of the things we did was go to Notre Dame because, as with so many people, we wanted to see what it was like after the restoration. We had talked about make sure you get tickets in that episode before you go to Notre Dame. We did not get tickets, but it was only a 20-minute line to get in. I would still recommend you go early in the morning, even if you have tickets, not because it takes so long to get in, but because there were so many people in the building when we got in. There were thousands of people, I think, probably in Notre Dame that we were touring with, but it is worth seeing. They did a wonderful job, and it's like seeing a brand new cathedral and definitely was worth the wait. As Jonty mentioned, there are still spaces on the Amateur Traveler May 2027 trip to Bolivia, and you should be there. So drop me an email or go to amateurtraveler.com/trips. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
I'm David Pryor, a travel writer and founder of the travel company Pryor. I'm inspired by places, but also curious about people.
I was 19 years old. It was fantastic.
It is so foreign, and it felt so apocalyptic.
So here I am talking to culture makers about their stories, what they've discovered on the road, and trying to understand the nature of their curiosity.
Talk about where I saw culture for the first time.
That mushroom tart, it was like sex.
This is a show about how travel informs the story of our lives. This is Traveling Through. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.